Brazil, Latin America's largest economy, part of the hopeful BRIC group of nations, and one of the most disappointing emerging market stories last year. Is this set to continue? I am asking Richard Lapper, who heads LatAm Confidential, one of the research titles part of the Financial Times. Richard, do you speak to a lot of fund managers regularly? How do they feel about Brazil?
I think, deep gloom really is the atmosphere surrounding Brazil amongst fund managers, certainly in the equity sector, less so in fixed income.
So that's not news. Everybody knows that, unfortunately, Brazil, from a macroeconomic level, will continue to disappoint perhaps this year.
I think so. I think we're looking at economic recession this year, at contraction rather this year. We're looking at a recession forecast now, consensus forecast of 0.5% contraction. I think it can only get worse, but there we are.
But what about specialist investors? Do you think that there may be some areas where some good investments may still be available?
I think there are one or two. I think the story in Brazil, the story in Latin America more generally, is one about differentiation. I think the mistake investors would make is to paint everything with the same negative brush. So in Brazil, I think that you can make a clear distinction between the agricultural sector, agribusiness, which is still highly productive, competitive in international terms, and an interesting sector. Not very many equity opportunities within it. You can talk positively, I think, too, about quite a lot of companies in the private sector in Brazil, perhaps some of the small and medium-sized companies that aren't that well known, that with the fall in prices in Brazilian equity markets are now potentially looking quite cheap.
So you can find a few good bargains for the ones that are willing to look more closely.
I think, specialist investors are doing exactly that. They're trying to look for value as the market's taken a real, has been hammered, basically, and I think there is tremendous pessimism around. Within that, there is clearly a great deal of concern about a sovereign downgrade in Brazil. We had a Petrobras downgrade earlier this week, a lot of corporate downgrades, but within this sort of general atmosphere of fear and pessimism, I think, value can be found. The private sector in Brazil is by and large quite well managed.
What about the debt side? So an investor that is looking at debt.
I think overhanging any, the market for fixed income investors is it's a spectre of potential downgrade of the sovereign. And that will affect people's willingness to go out longer term. And the yields are quite attractive in Brazil. What I think is happening to some extent is people are preferring rather to buy at the shorter end, where they're basically taking less risk on and getting well rewarded for the risk they do take on too.
What about the long-term picture?
It's very difficult to say. I think Brazil, we've got this combination of very unfortunate circumstances, a recession, a ongoing, deeply damaging scandal at Petrobras and surrounding Petrobras, and a pretty difficult political scenario. It's very difficult to see a short-term fix to that. I think when Joaquim Levy was appointed to the finance ministry in December, a lot of optimism was raised. I think over the last couple of months, we've seen that optimism by and large dissipate.
So a big question mark still hanging over Brazil this year, with potential niche little gems to be discovered in the market. And I know that you guys at LatAm Confidential are going to look into specific companies that may be of interest to investors. So I look forward to catching up with you when the report will be ready.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Silvia.